Hello and welcome to the Cyberden, your weekly dose of tech and games. I, Jake the Voice, will be chatting with Lee Jackson, composer for Duke Nukem 3D, Shadow Warrior, and much more. He's also best known as the creator of the Duke Nukem theme, Grabbag. Thanks for coming, mate.
Thank you for having me on the show. It's a real pleasure.
Now, Lee, please tell everyone listening what inspired you to compose music for video games.
Just basically playing it from my earlier days. I started off on an old bass clarinet back in my junior high school days, which would have been around age 13 or so. And once I got into high school, I started taking music theory lessons. There was just some stuff inside that needed to get out, more or less. Worked from there on to a few things going while I was working other jobs. Didn't really hit any success until I got hooked up with a certain company by the name of Apogee Software you might have heard of. When I moved up here, I was doing technical support, and that's pretty much all that I was doing at the time. But then when I got on to tech support, they decided to move their programmers in-house, and I managed to get my hands on a copy of a music composition program. Brought some stuff up to Tom Hall, the creator of the Commander Keen series, and at the time he was working on what was going to be the sequel to the original Wolfenstein 3D. It was going to be Wolfenstein 2, Rise of the Triad, and I brought a few things up to him, let him listen to it, and he started deciding, well, maybe this should go into the game. Everything went from there. The first thing that really got put into a game, though, was a version of the Apogee fanfare, what kicks in whenever you started up one of the Apogee games. Bobby Prince had written the original theme, and I took it and gave it a little bit of a John Williams treatment, put some strings and French horns and a little harp glissando at the end of it. And that was the very first thing that I actually got paid for. When it came to recording or doing any kind of music. That was a little MIDI file. It was quite an accomplishment around the house. It got me a total of about $250, but I was very happy with it.
What was it like composing and creating music back in the 90s, especially with such primitive tech compared to nowadays?
Starting off with when I got promoted to what they call the music and sound director position, my workspace was a lunch table, a folding lunch table that had a computer on it and a pair of speakers. And again, it was all on just this little folding table. Well, the software was sufficient to get everything done. I would just put it together while everybody was working, tried to keep the volumes down so that nobody underneath me, because we were up on the second floor of a building. I didn't want anybody down below complaining that there's this rock or orchestra coming out from upstairs. Didn't want any thumping going down through into the offices. But it was very, very bare bones at first. And to be honest, it was actually kind of nice because it gave me a set of limits to work with. The music composition part of it, like I said, it limited me to what I could do. I had to figure out ways around some of the limitations in order to get the sounds that I wanted. And that's actually quite a bit of fun. It's like you're an artist that's been handed a set of 16 colors, let's say, 16 tubes of oil paint, and you've been told to redo the Sistine Chapel just using those colors. Okay, well, how do you go about mixing them? Well, that's up to you. Nobody's ever done that before. So that's the kind of situation that it was back in the early 90s.
Let's talk about the main theme for Duke Nukem, Grabbag. Where did you draw inspiration from when you were creating this song, and how did the production of the song go down?
A lot of listening. There was a day where I just went around the programming team and asked for some CDs that I could listen to. Went home and listened to them all in one great big binge. A lot of Iron Maiden, a lot of Metallica, a lot of Megadeth, you name it, whatever they had that was heavy metal, I was listening to it. So Once I got finished with that, I sat down and just started playing around with the aspects of what I'd heard and tried to come up with something that had a little bit of each, I guess you could say, the identifying elements of the genre. I mean, Ozzy Osbourne sounds different from Megadeth, sounds different from Judas Priest, that kind of stuff. But I put it all together, or at least tried to, and by the end of my session, working in Cakewalk Pro Audio, I had to save the file under some sort of name, and I didn't know what to call it. So I just thought, well, this is really just a big grab bag of different sounds, so that's where it got its name, Grabbag. One night, as the entire team is about ready to go see, I think, the first Star Trek movie, all of us together standing in line, I get told by Greg Malone, who was the project director at the time, oh, by the way, we're going to be using Grabbag as the theme song for Duke Nukem, and you could have knocked me over with a toothpick off of that. I was just dumbstruck. And the song wasn't even really complete at that time. If you go back and play the very first version of the game, you'll notice that it gets right up to the section where a guitar solo starts in the full version of the song, and then it just loops. I got my official nod to go on and do more music for the game, and after finding out that it really was going to be the theme song for the game, I asked for some time to expand it. And that's where the guitar solo and the keyboard solo came from. And eventually the whole song got itself out there, and that's, in essence, the story of Grabbag right there.
There are so many covers of Grabbag out there. Are there any that kind of stand out to you?
Here I am, somebody who didn't even graduate from the University of Texas, getting other people, I'm inspiring other people to do work based on something that I've plunked down in Cakewalk Pro Audio. Cover versions just kept coming and coming and coming, and then all of a sudden, here's Megadeth, and they do a cover version of it, which went out on the Risk album in Japan. It's only listed on the credits as bonus track, I think. Doesn't have my name attributed on it, but that was a real blast to hear that. But then other people got hold of it and started doing proper covers. So just to clarify why, I never did release a MIDI version of the song, something that somebody could actually play. The song was buried within the game. You could copy it from hearing it, but you really couldn't play it on your own little sound card. I wound up just about a year or so ago finally releasing a General MIDI and a Roland GS version of the original song. I pulled everything that was non-standard out of the song files and put them up on my website, which you can get to at leejacksonaudio.lbjackson.com. Both of the files are up there, available for anybody who wants to play with them for any kind of non-commercial purpose.
Are there any other songs that you've composed that you consider to be some of your favorites? Aside from Grabbag, of course.
Outside of Grabbag, some of the songs that I've done, some of my favorites have been ones that I did for Stargunner, which is the last Apogee game, or at least the last game released under the Apogee name up until recently. That one turned out to be one of my favorite deals because it was very high-tech. The game was a flying, horizontal scrolling shooter. You're in a spaceship, you get to buy all kinds of plasma weapons and things of that sort to shoot on different levels, one in space, one on the ground, and one under the ocean. So I got to use those as inspirations for some of the songs that I did. Other songs included some of the stuff that I did for Shadow Warrior. I've been told that by one of my old professors, or at least one of the old deans back at the University of Texas, who got his hands on the recording, that it was, quote-unquote, a pleasurable listen. And that was a real compliment, because that was another game that I had to binge on. I got recordings of Oriental music, mainly Japanese, and I had visions of him crawling around through somebody's castle and trying to keep the floorboards from squeaking. That's one of the favorite stories from Japan. a castle over there that you can't walk through without the floorboards squeaking, so that people can tell that you're coming in the middle of the night. I tried to apply that to some of the songs, and wound up using a couple of Japanese instruments called a koto and a shamisen as the primary sounds for the tracks. All of them had a little bit of one or the other, and just getting into the entire culture, learning about Japan, it's stuck with me ever since. And I drive my wife crazy by ordering things from overseas through one of the Japanese vendors at times. But that game really did have an impact on me, not only in music-wise, but as a person. And I loved working on it. It was a blast.
It was great to see that Shadow Warrior finally got the love it deserved ever since it was re-released a handful of years ago in HD.
It is. I like to see the game get the respect that it's due. Even if my own music isn't attached to the new version of the game, doesn't matter. The game is out there, and that was a story in itself, the Lo Wang character. Getting him recorded is about one of the funniest things I've ever been involved in, short of going to an evening at the Improv or a comedy club. We had a person by the name of John William Galt, who we auditioned and chose as the voice, and he happened to have been stationed in Japan while he was in the military and had learned Hapkido, so he was really a great candidate for the role. A lot of people have criticized the game because it pokes some fun at some Asian stereotypes, but I guarantee you that that was not the intent. John William Galt did what he did knowing about Japanese culture, and he did it with great respect. And we tried to pull that off that way, but at the same time, we had a total ton of fun recording things. Some of his ad-libs were just too good not to put into the game. Things like a sword being a personal weapon, and him talking about the shuriken being something that you throw in the night and you don't know where it lines up until you hear it go thunk and someone screams. But he was a real comedian, and he's done a lot of other commercial work here in the United States. He has a pretty good reputation, pretty good career as a voice artist, and I would love to be able to work with him again. All I did on that one mainly was sit outside the recording booth and just laugh myself crazy at times.
Now, there was a bonus track in Shadow Warrior called Lo Wangs Rap. Could you tell us a bit more about this track?
That one was fun. We had a request from the company that was going to be publishing it, I believe GT Interactive, I think, or that's what we were going with, Shadow Warrior. They had sent down I guess you could call it a script that they wanted the character to do a rap out of. Well, John William Galt may be a great voice actor, but he can't sing to save his life. We did the voice session. I tried to get him to get through it, and we did get everything that this publisher wanted, but when it came to actually putting the song together, I wound up using a grand total of one word from that recording session, the word now. Everything else was an outtake or from an interview that we did with him as a person playing Lo Wang. We did a couple of those up at our office. They're just samples that I put together inside of an digital audio workstation program. And underneath, I'd composed something, again, mainly using the Kurzweil and the Roland SC-88. A lot of Japanese flute stuff, the koto and the shamisen again, but I put a rap beat underneath it, and I took his voice samples and just put them in time with the music, sliced them, diced them, did whatever was necessary, and we came up with Lo Wang's Rap. And first time I played it, it was funnier watching the people listening to it than it was listening to it myself, because I'd gone through and heard it, and I was just overjoyed that it was making people laugh. And unfortunately, it didn't get used at E3, which was the intent of the rap, but it did get put on as a bonus song, and it's played through the credits, I believe. It's still out there. It's still up on YouTube. Just do a search for Low Wangs Rap, and you'll find it. And I guarantee you'll have a good time listening to it, especially if you look at it from that point of view of all of the samples that were just sliced and diced and put together.
At the moment, you've been writing a science fiction novel. Could you tell us a bit more about it?
Science fiction novel, that is something that I'm trying to do to keep myself busy. Unfortunately, I've been through a couple of things since going through 3D realms that have left me with what we call over here disability status, Social Security disability. I can't work on a regular basis anymore. So what I've been doing instead, my wife calls it a hobby, but she's behind me 100%, is been coming up with a novel based on an idea that my son and I came up with back in the year 2000. Those are the earliest notes that I have. And the name of the novel is Tapper. I'll just read you a blurb about it that I have here. It's 2089, and Travis just wants to keep from flunking out of college. His panic over flunking is quickly replaced by surprise when a stranger with unusual powers presents him with an unbelievable job offer. Join the legendary Zilker Institute, where he'll train to become one of the select few who can manipulate gravity, electromagnetism, and the other forces that govern the universe. In other words, a tapper. The price? His identity, for starters. He'll also have to overcome his worst nightmares every time the Institute's dangerous technology unlocks his brain. Succeed, and he gains the ability to see and control the fundamental forces of nature. Fail, and he could wipe out an entire city. So that is what I've been working on. The book itself is waiting for an agent to pick it up and put it in front of a publisher. I just got through that particular part of the work, and I'm waiting on some responses now. Might be waiting a little bit longer because there's some stuff that I've got working on, or at least playing around with, in conjunction with Gearbox Software. I've entered into a little bit of a relationship with them. Unfortunately, I can't say anything more about that other than we have a relationship, and it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of it. And I promised them that I'll be working with them nonstop until we're done. But eventually, I hope everybody can read Tapper and also read the sequel that's already under production. So I have my fingers crossed on both of those. Like I said, it started out as just something that my son and I were talking about. Back in 2000, he was in high school, or just about to enter high school, and we were goofing around one day, came up with this idea of what if you could reach the deeper, reach an inner power hidden in somebody's brain, but in order to get there, you had to go through the worst nightmares that your brain can generate. But the two of us talking about it just kind of blossomed into a couple of notes here and there. Once I went on from 3D realms and went into doing radio, I started doing a little bit of studying about the mind, about what does what in there. And then once I went on to disability, I spent even more time studying and then actually plonking the words into the old word processor here. And we've got a book that's 30 chapters long. I hope that there are 30 exciting chapters, and I believe if I can get an agent, might well see something next year.
Lee, it's been an absolute blast. Thank you so much for coming to this interview.
It's been a real pleasure, and I do appreciate all of the people, especially all of the people who have taken what I've written and used it as inspiration for variations on the material, and hopefully gone on to create their own material from it. That's a really important part of the cover process. You learn by copying, and then by breaking the rules that you've learned through copying and going on and doing your own stuff. And if I've done that for one person, I've done a good job, and I'm glad to hear it.
I'd like to thank all of my wonderful listeners for checking out this great interview right here on the Cyberden, your weekly dose of tech and games. Thank you very much for coming, Lee. See you later.